Good morning and welcome to the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce's discussion of the ongoing natural gas and G reforms in Brazil and explore the opportunities for investors interested in the Brazilian energy market. Today we have a panel of key decision makers in Brazil who will provide an overview of upcoming greenfield and brownfield opportunities, tendencies, challenges, and an overall forward-looking overview of the industry. I am John Welch, Executive Director of the Brazilian American Chamber, and on behalf of the Chamber, we wish all of you health and safety in this difficult time. Thank you for coming. I wanted to especially thank our sponsor, Machado Meyer Advogados, for helping us with this event. Let me briefly introduce our panelists. You can find their full bios on the link provided on the reminder sent out yesterday and on the Chamber's website. Our moderator today is Szyfman, who leads the oil and gas practice at Machado Meyer. A relevant part of his practice is dedicated to complex transactions, often cross-border, such as M&A and projects, and regulatory issues. He is also part of the power team with a particular focus on power generation projects. Also joining us is Anelise Quintão Lara, Chief Refining and Natural Gas Officer at Petrobras. And she is a chemical engineer and Chief of Refining and Natural Gas at Petrobras. She joined Petrobras in 1986 as a reservoir engineer. Since then, she has held managerial positions at Libra Block, one of the biggest pre-salt areas in Brazil and the world. In the global divestment program, acting as the Chief Refining and Natural Gas Officer, as well as a board member at SPE and chair of the Brazilian Petroleum Gas and Biofuels Institute's Board of Directors, IBP. She holds a PhD in Earth Sciences from the Université Pierre et Marie Curie in Paris, France, and also completed advanced executive programs at Eyberg and Copiade in Rio de Janeiro. Currently Vice President of Energy Marketing, Claudia Brun joined Equinor in January 2018 to develop gas marketing opportunities to enable the monetization of Equinor's upstream assets in Brazil. With a career spanning 24 years negotiating complex joint energy ventures, with substantial experience in upstream E&P projects, oil, gas, and power marketing, terminal storage, and loading operations, and power plant development. She has held senior positions at Qatargas, Ras Laffan, terminal operations in Doha, commercial director at El Paso, Brazil, director at Enron South America, and manager of project finance at EnergyWorks. Ms. Brun holds a BA from Eckerd College, Florida, and an MBA from Thunderbird in Arizona. Victor Muñoz serves as operating partner at Denham Capital, responsible for the origination, analysis, structuring, and execution of investments within the Latin American region. With 26 years of experience, Victor is also a member of the Valuation Committee, the Power Deal Team, and the Mining Deal Team. Prior to joining Denham, Mr. Muñoz was director at PSEG Global, manager at Enron North America, and Associated Chase Securities. He currently serves on the board of directors of Mining Ventures Brazil Limitada, Stellar Mining, Santiago Melos, Rio Energy. Mr. Muñoz holds a bachelor's degree from Universidad de los Andes in Colombia and a master's in an MBA from Harvard Business School. Kevin Lowder is managing director of EIG Global Energy Partners, where he is responsible for investment activity and operations in Brazil as head of EIG's Rio de Janeiro office. He has been with EIG since 2007. Mr. Lowder is vice chairman of the board of directors of Brun Logística S.A. and Aço Petróleo. He holds a BBA in finance with a concentration in energy from the Macomb School of Business at the University of Texas in Austin. Eric Eyberg is vice president head of America's Gas and LNG Consulting at Wood Mackenzie, based in Houston, Texas. In 13 years at Wood Mackenzie, he has led numerous America's natural gas, LNG, and power value chain market studies, growth strategies, asset and company diligence and financing efforts, monetization, energy procurement, and marketing strategies and negotiations in support for the largest America's folk E&P, infrastructure, LNG developers, utilities, industrials, PE funds, investors, governments, and NOCs. He is a recognized gas and LNG expert in the Americas and led Wood Mackenzie consulting practice expansion into Latin America, based in Rio de Janeiro. He holds a BS in Economics and International Business from Penn State University and an MBA from INSEAD. And finally, Camila Galvão is Senior Tax Partner Machado Meyer, specializing in administrative disputes and consultancy. focusing on the settlement of highly complex tax issues and in strategic administration litigation. She has 25 years of experience in the structuring business and logistics models, contemplating tax effects in internal and cross-border activities, specifically in the areas of energy, oil, and gas and infrastructure. Before we begin this exploration, I would ask you to please use the Q&A tab for questions. You can make them at any time, and we will look to answer them after the panel discussion during the Q&A period. Thank you. Now I would like to pass the screen to Thales Saito, partner and head of the New York office at Machado Meyer Advogados, and an indefatigable director and supporter of the Chamber. Thales?
Hi, John. Good morning. I'd like to start off thanking everybody for joining our event. As John mentioned, my name is Thales Saito. I'm a partner of Machado Meyer and the head of our New York office. Machado Meyer is a leading law firm in Brazil, and we have an office in New York for almost 20 years. From New York, I'm committed to serve as a bridge between US and Brazil, helping our clients structuring business and foreign investments in the country. I'm really happy to be sponsoring this event and to talk about reforms. About this matter, it's worth stressing out the commitment of the Brazilian government in approving reforms with the purpose of first, achieving fiscal stability, second, improving investments in Brazil, and third, boosting the Brazilian economy, especially through the participation of the private sector. Important reforms have already been approved, such as the labor, the pension, and more recently, the water sewage reform. But there's still a lot to do in Brazil, right? And today, we're here to talk about the natural gas reform, which I imagine is very important for everybody that is here. This is a reform that basically has the purpose of creating opportunities for other players of the private sector and also guaranteeing the supply of natural gas in a safe and competitive way. Very exciting discussion. We have major players of the market in the panel. We really hope you enjoyed the event. John, thank you very much for the opportunity. We're very happy to be here.
Okay, well, thank you, Thales and John, and especially the whole BrazilCham for putting this together. I think Thales used the right word. We're all very excited. We have a great lineup of speakers. As you've seen, it's a non-legal lineup, basically, so we'll try to keep legal stuff to the minimum necessary. But I must say, 20 years working in this industry, it's so exciting what we are seeing right now. It's basically, we're going to talk about all of the reforms that are going on, and I sometimes refer them as a revolution. At least when I look back to what we used to do in terms of gas in Brazil, it's definitely a big change. And the idea here is that we provide, especially to those who are located overseas and have not been able to follow in detail what's been going on in this whole natural gas reform. We're going to talk about this, what the so-called new gas market, what are the reforms and what they're trying to accomplish. We're going to show you that the whole chessboard of players and the whole chain of industry is up for changes, and of course this creates opportunities, especially investment opportunities, and at the same time there's lots that needs to be made, and we'll go on. We're going to have a transition period. Other jurisdictions have faced the same. So Brazil is at, I would say, early but very important stages of opening up the market. And you will hear from the specialists today what this will actually mean in terms of the chain, in terms of the framework, in terms of the tax issues that people will face. And obviously, we're going to talk about the economics and the whole demand picture that is usually one of the main questions investors have. Now, I'll jump straight to our first speaker. Anelise has been already presented her bio by John. I met Anelise at her time as head of M&A, which was the position she held just before her current position. So she is just the right person to be explaining to you guys Petrobras' view of the market opening. And I will just start by you sharing the screen of her slides so she can start her presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. This slide, please. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about investments opportunities in the Brazilian industry, gas industry, with an outstanding team of professionals. As you know, gas market in Brazil is booming, and we believe that the opening that are happening now will bring lots of opportunities for strategic and financial investors. Up to now, Petrobras has been the dominant gas provider in the country with a huge presence in all gas value chain. I will talk briefly about the gas market in Brazil, some challenges and opportunities that we are facing now. Next slide, please. Well, our main gas production in Brazil comes with oil with associated gas in offshore fields. So the increase in gas production follows the oil production growth. Saying that, the gas has a strategic role in the oil production curve, especially in pre-salt fields where we have higher oil and gas rates together with CO2, and the project development decision should always be taken into account the presence of gas. The question is, what brings more value to the equation? Reinject the gas to sustain reservoir pressure, or increase oil recovery, or to evacuate this gas to shore? This is a strategic decision for production development and should be taken early in the life cycle of the project and based on an economic analysis. Next slide, please. This slide shows the magnitude and geographical distribution of natural gas supply and demand in Brazil. From the supply side, we have three different sources. Domestic production from Petrobras fields with many partners, imported gas from Bolivia with pipeline capacity of 30 million cubic meters per day, and LNG import. Petrobras overall capacity in LNG import is around 47 million cubic meters per day. In terms of gas transportation infrastructure, we count today with three main gas pipelines: TAG, NTS, and TBG. And from the demand side, we have three different destinations for gas: thermal plants, Petrobras internal consumption, mainly the refineries, and non-thermal demand, like industry, commercial, residential, and vehicular. Next slide, please. Before COVID-19, overall gas demand in Brazil was around 82 million cubic meters per day. Nowadays, our demand is around 65 million cubic meters per day. Southeast region is the biggest gas consumer in the country, consuming 62% of the total. It's interesting to observe that in 3 of our 5 regions, the major part of gas consumption is directed to power generation. Next slide, please. This slide shows gas supply forecast up to 2029 and a prospective scenario for supply and demand for the next 10 years based on the latest EPE's forecast. The main messages are: overall supply likely to increase 15% between now and 2029. Despite of increasing domestic oil production, Brazil will remain gas importer at least during this decade. This scenario also shows an increasing in overall demand, especially thermoelectric consumption. Next slide, please. This slide shows the main milestones in the regulatory framework towards a more transparent, dynamic, and competitive gas market in Brazil. 2016 was a starting point with Gas to Grow program. It was a governmental program for Brazilian gas market opening. In this same year, Petrobras also took an important decision that was to sell 90% of Petrobras' stake in NTS gas pipeline. Last year, we signed an agreement with the Antitrust Authority, CADE, to establish the main steps and schedules for the company to reduce its participation in the domestic gas market. And this month, we had a very important decision from the House of Representatives, the approval with no amendments of the natural gas bill. Next step is the submission to the Senate, an important milestone that we hope to be overcome very soon. Next slide, please, the last one. And to conclude this presentation, I would like to show the main commitments between Petrobras and CADE towards the gas market opening. These milestones represent the importance of Petrobras' role in this process. Our main commitments in this document are total divestment in gas transportation and distribution companies in Brazil, negotiated access to gathering and processing infrastructure, third-party access to pipeline transmission capacity, Bahia's LNG terminal to be leased up to 2023, reduction of gas purchase from other players to encourage their access to the gas market in Brazil. As I said in the beginning, this agreement with CADE and the approval of the new regulatory framework represent huge opportunities for investors and I believe for all stakeholders in gas market in Brazil. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anelise. Very interesting to see the changes, but also the potential, right? I mean, in terms of the demand and Brazil being still a net importer for the next 10 years just shows how much potential we have here. And to continue talking about a little bit the demand and the potential of the market, let's have Eyberg from WoodMac. He's going to give a short presentation as well. Eric's been presented, and for those who don't know, he's extremely active in Brazil, almost too active as we joked the other day. He used to be based in Brazil, so knows quite a lot about the market, and we'll learn from him. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Anelise. Also, thank you to the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, Machado, Meyer, also fellow panelists, many of whom I know, and the attendees for making time today. So I'll bring in Wood Mackenzie's perspectives around the gas market, more forward-looking in terms of the context of the reforms that Anelise has spoken about a bit more. So as Danielle mentioned, I had the pleasure to live in Rio for a number of years. Also, I'm married to a Brazilian, so I feel myself almost Brazilian, maybe an honorary Brazilian, but it's now been 7 months since I've been in Brazil because of the crisis, when I'm usually there every 4 to 6 weeks. But in the meantime, my team has been extremely busy in Brazil in 2020. And we've been looking at pipeline transactions. We've been looking at LDCs. We've been looking at gas supply for the power auction, of course, that was delayed. And also small-scale LNG is a big topic for us. And we've got a couple of efforts, one that's more entry strategy, one that's helping to run a process to acquire equipment and LNG. And all of these have a key regulatory and reform element, as you imagine. So I'll start high level. Overall, as Anelise said, natural gas does play a pretty modest role in Brazil's energy matrix. On the left-hand side chart, you can see that gas has gained share over time. It's the gray. But on the right-hand side, compared to Latin America peers, and of course, every market is very specific, and has its unique qualities, it's pretty low in terms of penetration. We're talking about 12% penetration in the energy matrix. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost is that Brazil's power market is hydro dominated. So hydroelectricity provides anywhere from 70 to 80% of power in Brazil. But gas is still on the margin a lot of the time. And gas plays a really key role during dry hydro years. Secondarily, for residential and commercial sectors, of course, Brazil doesn't have a lot of heating requirements like some of the other countries like Argentina and Chile have. So you don't see a huge heating demand element. But I think I want to take the opportunity to say we've looked at Brazil. Last year, we did a 6-month effort looking at the municipality level. So we didn't cover all 5,000 plus municipalities, but we looked at over 3,000 municipalities in Brazil, and we looked across the fuels, and we looked at what was the gas demand potential in Brazil. And we also developed a timeline for how you could develop the network from a distribution company perspective. And what I can say is that there is a significant upside potential in Brazil. There is a lot of market to be captured. It just depends upon a number of key factors. And in fact, just to give you an idea of size, we think that there is effectively twice the size of demand as in our base case. That's possible, that's potential, of course, subject to a number of things happening. At the same time, on the supply side, we expect marketable gas production capacity and LNG regas capacity, which is a lot more flexible, to double. And what I mean by marketable gas production capacity is how much gas could be marketed and could be monetized onshore, not how much we actually believe does. And so what this is showing is that there's a significant supply potential, as Anelise showed on the EPI's view of the 2029 plan. Here, if you build up piece by piece, and I'll start at the bottom. So the commercial technical production capacity is how much that is proven today do we believe could be, again, marketed. Second is the yet to find, which is yet to find resources that we have some line of sight on. Third is Bolivia, and this is actually our base case Bolivia import view. And then, of course, we have in the gray LNG regas capacity, which is flexible capacity used to help balance the market, especially important for the power sector. And I want to draw your attention to the two red lines here. The solid red line is Wood Mackenzie's base case domestic demand view in a normal hydro year. And so that's our latest from about a month ago. And then you can see the dotted line is the dry year view. So there's a lot of variability between a normal hydro year and a dry hydro year in Brazil. But interestingly, you can see starting in 2026 and 27, our view is that you could have a big wave of domestic supply. And again, this is productive capacity. It's not necessarily what actually comes to the market. But what it shows us is that we do have a big slog of natural gas supply that we expect to be coming to market. And so ultimately what that means is we have to get the demand side growth back. And we haven't had a lot of growth in the demand markets over the last several, let's call it 5 years. The reason why we haven't had a lot of demand growth over the last 5 years is because of economics, primarily, when we take away the power sector. But we do expect a return to growth. And so there's a number of options that we think about when we look at the demand side. And we look at kind of 4 key criteria to think about those options: infrastructure costs, so overall cost. Second is the market viability. Third is economic impact. Fourth is social impact. And the first 2 are really focused on what to do with offshore gas. As Anelise said, the decision around reinjection is really taken early on. There's testing done, of course, and you're trying to reach optimization there. But there's always the option to reinject the offshore gas. There's no economic value, unfortunately, which is the big negative, and it could impact your oil production optimization if you don't do it carefully. But it is the simplest solution, and the cost is really limited to the reinjection well, which is not cheap, but obviously very different in scale. The second is LNG exports. LNG exports, you know, we've talked about LNG exports out of Brazil for, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. FLNG competitiveness, Brazil, you have to think about how would it compete with US LNG exports, Mozambique, Qatar, and other places across the world, Russia. And so when you start to think about that, the competitiveness is a really key challenge here. And you also would have to focus on areas that have lots of scale. On the pro side, obviously it's large scale monetization and you're able to get global market exposure. The other three are really focused on the domestic market, and it goes back to what I said before. There's lots of potential in Brazil. The first is gas-fired power generation. And one challenge right off the bat is that there's not a huge need for incremental capacity beyond what has already been agreed and what is under construction to 2025. Beyond that time, it's a very big competitiveness analysis. We do see a need for additional gas-fired power generation capacity in Brazil, but you look at renewables, you also look at hydro and other options as well. The other potential negative is that it's been focusing off-grid recently. And so as far as helping to develop the market, the gas market, if we only have off-grid projects, as we've had recently, there obviously needs to be some integration in order for that to flow through to the marketplace beyond the power market. The positive side, it can be located very proximate to the supply, and it serves as an anchor to help boost the market. Industrialization is another one. And industrialization, again, you have the off-grid discussions. There's a lot of discussions around what to do around different LNG or offshore direct connects to industry. We're obviously living that today. The low cost of gas is really critical to make this work, but in a lot of different applications, it's the highest value in use. It can also be located proximate to supply areas, and it can be serving as an anchor, and it really does help to serve as an anchor to build out the system, and also the interiorization of gas in Brazil. The last category is really gas massification, and that's residential, commercial, it's NGVs via transport. It's also small-scale LNG. And those, you know, on the negative side, it really depends upon policy and regulatory changes to really drive, you know, a tremendous uptick in growth here. It's more gradual growth than the other options, but it does have the highest impact for social and economic development. And with the appropriate incentives and legal framework, value chain investors can really drive this. So there's a lot of opportunity here. I think the message is, on the supply side, we have a lot of supply headed toward us. We need to unlock that potential by obviously thinking about how do we create that demand. And then ultimately, you know, this is, the market situation is really primed for the reform. But the catalyst to drive the investment and development will be consistent progress and industry alignment around the reform. I've never seen us in a better place since I've covered Brazil in my career. I feel very positive, and we have kind of 5 key signposts here. I think Anelise already covered a lot of these quite well, as did Danielle. First is the successful gas value chain divestment of Petrobras. We're in the midst of that. That's moving quite well and moving quickly. Second is, and really important, is continued legal and regulatory reform progress, but also agility. And what we mean by agility is, if you look at any reform process that's happened over the last, let's call it 50 years globally, what we know is that we're going to make some decisions that are suboptimal. And so we need to, as industry and as stakeholders, and also the policymakers, need to have that agility. It's not just the law. The law, of course, passed Congress. It's sitting with the Senate. We expect in a couple of weeks it may be sitting on Bolsonaro's desk. But it's also about continued amendments and refinements of the ANP and MME resolutions. It's really important to see that continue. And there's a lot of work ahead of us, as was mentioned before. And finally, at the state level, it's really the harmonization of the regulations and the commercialization rules, which is continuing to evolve and really important. We put a check mark there. We think we're moving in the right direction, but there is a lot of work to do. The third is the third-party infrastructure capacity contracting. Everything is set up for this. We have open seasons planned, and we've had an open season. This is not only transport, but as Anelise said, it's also Bahia. So it's the on-system LNG capacity. It's gathering and processing as well. So we see that as really critical. The fourth is commercial risk sharing. Why? Because Petrobras took on all the risk. Petrobras took on all the risk across the value chain in the gas industry. And so it's the what I'm calling phased value chain unbundling to help drive non-Petrobras GSAs, to help drive secondary market development. This is the LDCs, this is industrials, power plants, producers, traders, marketers. Big question mark as to how long that takes and as it takes off. And then last but not least, we always say, we need to have patience as we build functioning markets and liquidity, because eventually a lot of the popular off-grid solutions will start to integrate with the system, but it's going to take time. We're bad at being patient around reform. If you look at gas market reforms globally, the fastest that I would say were relatively successful was 7 to 10 years. We're trying to do this even faster. And some have taken 20 plus years of those that have been successful. But we have obviously clear signs of progress. And so we see the actions occurring, we see key signs of progress, and never seen the industry so aligned as we are today. And we see a pretty bright future in terms of investment and in terms of growth. But obviously we're going to have some bumps along the way. So something to expect. With that, I'll conclude my presentation, obviously take questions later, and I'll pass it on to Camila and Danielle.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was clearly very comprehensive. I like quite a lot the pros and cons chart. We could certainly spend a lot of time there. And also thank you for presenting a little bit of the challenges and the phasing out. I think this goes well into what Camila and I will discuss a little bit. And for those who join later, I said this was a non-legal panel and that we will try to keep legal stuff to the minimum, and I'll try to hold up to that promise. But we thought it was important, even from an, let's say, purely investor perspective, to have an overview of what's going on the legal side. And a little bit has been already said by the ones who came before me. So this is what we're going to try and cover. It's a mixture of legal and tax things, but all having in mind what's important from an investment decision-making perspective, or for those who are not really familiar with Brazil, to try and understand where we are in the process of the legal changes that have been made, are in progress, and will still be necessary in the long run. So the first one, obviously, I don't want to be talking about the Constitution too much here, but I think it's important to split a little bit in terms of jurisdiction. I mean, we're talking about, Anelise mentioned, and I'll speak a little bit later about the Bill of Law in Congress. For those who are familiar, we have the federal agency ANP, who's been very active in the new gas market reforms. But, as lawyers, I like to start with the Constitution, because in Brazil, the idea was, everybody here is familiar with the gas chain. And by the way, this is an oversimplification, both of the chain, but most importantly, the legal issue, because what I'm going to be talking about here has a lot of complexities. So most of it is pretty much federal, certainly all the upstream and midstream towards the end. But what the Constitution did was to elect marketing, the LDCs, to be within the state powers. And that means both the law itself, the regulator, the concession contract, all of the important things pertaining to that business is on a state level. And we'll explain a little bit how that changes in the reforms, but it is important to know there is certain overlap between what is written in the Constitution, which is a little bit more complex than this, and other activities which fall within the federal scope. So transportation is clearly federal, but when you have certain pipelines being built and need to be authorized there has been cases where there is a gray area between federal power and state power, and also trading, which is within the federal capacity, but also states have power to regulate that activity within the state border. So in the end of the day, we're going to talk about the next slides, things to come, and for gas, differently from power, for instance, you need to know that some parts of the opening will be within the states. That's the key message of this slide. Now, talking about the Bill of Federal Law, the so-called new gas law that we're all quite excited that got approved in the lower house a few days ago. Now the last step in the Congress is the Senate, and then goes to President's sanction. Now, why it's so important? I just picked 5 items here for you to know. So the first one is the legal regime for transportation and storage. It may be simple, look like a simple change of name, but in reality, the current gas law chose the concession regime, which didn't work out in the end of the day. For various reasons, we have no concessions for transportation or storages. So we're going back to authorization, which is a regime that I would say more adherent to the reality of those business. So that's an important one. We are confirming something that has been already in practice in the open season and in a federal decree, but we're going to take it to the federal law level, the entry-exit model for GTAs. So the current model is based on the assumption that Petrobras holds the capacity in entry and exit points. When we have a more liquid and open market, the entry-exit model is again more adherent to the reality. It brings liquidity. It allows players to be not fully integrated if they don't want to, and they can have capacity only in the entry point or only in the exit points. There are obviously other changes, but in reality is the new model that Brazil is adopting for new GTAs. The third point is infrastructure and third-party access, which was in Eric's presentation as a question mark, and I mean, it's right, we haven't seen it yet, and the law, if approved, at least will bring the first element, which is a requirement in law, that evacuation pipelines, you know, you saw the charts, most of the production is offshore and they come to shore via these so-called evacuation pipelines. The processing units, as soon as they reach the shore, and LNG terminals, all those would be required to give third-party access. Non-discriminatory negotiated access, I should say. The definition of transportation pipelines is a clarification towards that gray area issue I mentioned in the previous slide. And the unbundling is basically given and based on international experience as well, restrictions in particular for TSOs in terms of equity ownership, but also other restrictions in terms of governance and information involving TSOs and LDCs with the other, we say the competitive part, the non-monopolistic part of the chain. Well, and then we get to the states, and as I said, for instance, if you want to know about the demand and the industry overview, the large consumer overview, the reality is that the reforms will be complete only when the states or the state where your plant is located adopt that. And there are a series of things that need to be done. So basically a change of the regulation and of the law in some cases if necessary, but obviously an improvement in the framework of the regulator, meaning capacity, meaning autonomy, meaning budget. And in some cases, there will be changes in the concession contract as well, either a negotiated amendment or at least a change when the current contract expires. All of those things are the first point here in my slide, is that the states have the jurisdiction to regulate the business of large consumers, self-important, self-producer. And of course, there are attempts to make it as a more coordinated effort. ANP has just released for the public to make comments on good practices, best practices for states. But in the end of the day, from a legal perspective, the states have the autonomy to regulate that. And that's obviously, in terms of having the reforms implemented, a challenge, because it multiplies the number of players, and we may not have uniformity, so we'll see how that goes. The second part is the privatization. States, by just historic reasons, have co-controlling stake in around 20 of the LDCs we have in Brazil, in a co-control with Gaspetro, which is the holding that Petrobras is divesting from. And some of them have decided, and others may follow, to sell that equity stake in the market. So we'll see not only changes at the regulation perspective, at the regulation level, but also ownership. For those who are interested in the LDC business, there will be opportunities coming down the road. And of course, Anelise has already explained, so I'll try to give a different angle here about the TCC, this commitment, and we talk about legal reforms. This is a contract that's been entered by Petrobras and CADE, and it's binding, so this is something that is already happening. So when we start with upstream, it's a major point that, as I said, most of production is offshore, and to date, partners of companies that are in partnership with Petrobras in the upstream, as a general rule, would sell gas at the wellhead or a little bit later to Petrobras. And one of the restrictions from that arises from the TCC is that Petrobras is no longer able to enter into GSAs, with some caveats and exceptions. In midstream, you see it's the bulk of the changes, and obviously, because we've been involved in many of them, I'll obviously stick to the part that is public, but Petrobras is in the process of leasing the LNG Bahia terminal. Companies have already listed for that. They're in competition, and we should know soon who's the winner of that lease. TPA to processing units, one of the obligations of Petrobras was to deliver to ANP the contracts. They're public now. And to Eric's point, that's where we'll start to see the changes of third-party access, which is Petrobras creating the contractual framework for third parties to have access to the processing units, the so-called UPGNs. Petrobras also was required to inform idle capacity in the transportation system, and it's already done so. That's very important, because the next point about the exit from the equity of the TSOs is very important and is clearly in progress, and TAGI is already been completed, and NTS in progress to be completed. But in the end of the day, that's about the ownership of the infrastructure. The capacity that goes in it, and is obviously very, very important to unlock and open the market, comes from the capacity release. So all of those things are being done at the same time, and the open season for the upcoming TSOs will already take into consideration this capacity that's being released. And in the downstream, the full exit from Gaspetro, as I said, and Anelise said, Petrobras is in the course of selling its 51% stake. Gaspetro has co-control of around 20 and full control of one of the LDCs. And there will be places where states will also be selling their co-controlling stake. So in the end of the day, clearly the biggest change in the downstream segment we've seen since the market was open 20-something years ago. So with that, I complete my part of the puzzle, and I'll ask my partner Camila to talk a little bit about the tax changes.
Thank you, Daniel. I would also like to thank the Chamber and all the panelists. It's an honor to be part of the panel with you. So why are we talking about taxes here? Well, taxes, the adjustments to the tax legislation is one of the pillars, one of the 4 pillars of the new gas market. That is the program launched by the current government to develop the market in Brazil. Brazilian tax system is known for being a very burdensome and complex tax system. So taxes are usually a driver for companies to choose how they will structure business in Brazil, and the choice affects obviously directly the financials of the project. And companies in Brazil are used to that, especially with the complexity regarding indirect taxes. And they manage to analyze that and to many times establish their businesses, even having a competitive advantage on taxes. But when it comes to the opening of the gas market, it's simply, many of the businesses that will occur simply don't fit into the current tax legislation. So these changes are a precondition to allow certain steps of the opening of the gas market to occur. And this is why it is considered one of the pillars of the opening of the new gas market. So in the next slide, we have main of the reasons of this the fact of the new businesses not fitting the current tax legislation are related to the state VAT. So the state VAT has a big impact in businesses. It's usually around 19% of the operations. And what occurs is that the state VAT applies on trade of goods and also on transportation services. But what happens is that the state VAT is all conceived, is all structured, thinking about traditional goods and traditional road or railway transportation. And the gas industry is a very peculiar industry, is an industry, a network industry. So the legislation, it's not possible to directly apply the legislation to the gas industry in the open market. And when we look at the open market, what happens is that we will have, so I brought here some of the main issues. We will have legal concepts, and I think the best example of that is the entry-exit model. And then when we go to the VAT legislation, it's dealing with transportation. It is thinking about transportation point to point, pretty much attached to the physical flow of the transportation and to the physical flow of the goods, which is not possible to apply to gas transportation. Then, apart from the new legal concepts, we will also have new businesses, so unprecedented businesses in logistic structures. And good examples of that are the third-party access to the processing facilities and to the regas facilities. And what happens is that it's not defined, it's not well defined in the legislation, in the tax legislation, what will be the taxes applied to these new contracts and to these new activities? And more than that, what will be the ancillary obligations applied to these new logistics? Because the logistics, the inventory controls, it's all different from what the current ancillary obligations of VAT provide for. And this is an important point, because the fines applicable to the non-accomplishment with the ancillary obligations are very high in most of the states in Brazil. Then, as a fourth point here, I put the increase of liquidity, because what is expected to happen is that the traders will increase its activities, and in the future, eventually, a virtual hub. And then when we look at the VAT rules, it is all attached to the physical flow of goods. So there may be a conflict of jurisdiction as to which the VAT, that is a state tax, will be due to the state in which the physical flow of gas occurs, or to the state in which the traders are located. And this is an important point that we also see in the projects when companies want to establish a trader in the country. And finally, as power generation is seen as a potential anchor for the development of the market, there is a relevant point regarding power generation that is due to the fact that according to the legislation, gas is taxed in the state of production and electric energy is taxed in the state of consumption. And that leads to the power plants not being able to offset the credits of VAT related to the acquisition of gas, which by its turn leads to an increase of cost of electricity generated by the power plants using gas as a fuel. And this has been also a very important question, a very important issue in the ongoing projects. And some states are already setting up measures to deal with it. So in the next slide, we have, so these are the problems, but we are happy that the changes are happening. We see the government and the federal government and the states analyzing. There is of course a knowledge that has to be acquired by the authorities, but we see the authorities analyzing the issues and the changes happening very fast. If we look at how long the tax changes happen in Brazil regarding gas, I believe the changes are happening very fast. So many important achievements were already reached. We had in 2016 the gas to grow. That was very important and discussed, one of the groups discussed a lot the tax issues. Then in 2018, the federal government launched a bid to hire a study on the tax aspects of the opening of the market. Our firm was fortunately chosen to make that study. And it was a very interesting study, a very broad study that we made together with the Ministry of Mines and Energy, ANP, and the IRS. It was a 6-month deep study on, we mapped all the taxation on the chain of natural gas, since production or important to import operations to midstream and consumption. And then a model was built considering the tax impacts on the cost of gas and on the cost for the industry and on the cost for production for energy. And based on all this study, we recommended the tax changes that would allow and optimize the development of the industry. So and this has been, the points raised in this study are continuously being analyzed by the government, federal and state governments, and some of the changes are being discussed and implemented. Another very important change that already occurred is the new ruling for VAT on gas transportation that was essential to allow the release of capacity, and it's already happened through an adjustment agreed between most of the state IRS in Brazil. This adjustment was also adapted to the entry-exit model, which was also very important. And now we are also discussing with state authorities, together with the representative in Petrobras, all the set of rulings for the third-party access to processing units. So all the rulings that will establish how the operations will be taxed and how all these controls and auxiliary obligations will be accomplished are under discussion. we see the states are discussing this in a high speed, and we expect to have it ruled very soon. So I think the idea that we have in this full process is that there are relevant and complicated tax aspects, but many of changes already, some still being discussed, but also when we work in the projects, we see that the projects are feasible. Taxes are always something you have to look at with attention, but the projects are feasible.
Thank you very much, Camila. And now, just before I introduce Kevin, just a technical point. Want to make sure Victor's audio is working. Victor, you want to say something?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Danielle, you're on mute.
That's classic, right? There's no webinar if somebody doesn't speak on mute. So Kevin was introduced his bio by John, and let me just say, for those who don't know EIG, well, EIG is a major player that's invested over 34 billion in 36 countries, and I didn't know that until Kevin told me, but over half of those have been in the natural gas related assets. And in Brazil, they are quite active. They've invested over $2 billion, and which includes the stake in the Brazil-Bolivia pipeline, the gas ball, an LNG terminal in the Açu port, the 6.5 gigawatt gas-fired power development at GNA, where they have a JV with BP, Siemens, and now State Power Investment Corp of China, and a series of domestic gas midstream development projects within the Brun investment, the so-called Açu gas hub. So we want to reach out to investors, and I think hearing from Kevin and what EIG has been doing in Brazil will be quite good to everyone. So Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to our host of the chamber, our sponsor, Machado Meyer. Thank you to my distinguished fellow panelists for allowing me to share some thoughts on this important topic today. Oftentimes I find myself presenting from the perspective of a producer, or at least an investor, on the producer side of the market. Today I don't add much from the producer perspective with Anelise and Claudia on the panel. They can both run circles around me on that topic. So, their companies, Equinor and Petrobras, do an extraordinary job, here in Brazil, drilling at 10,000 foot water depths, investing tens of billions of dollars. I think they often don't get enough credit for taking that risk, and I believe they certainly deserve to be rewarded for that. I've been challenged on this occasion to provide the perspective, but not from the supply side, but the demand side of the market equation. And I actually think of ourselves really more investing in infrastructure, playing the role of connecting, the supply and the demand. So I certainly hear often from that side, of the equation, the consumer. And so our goal is to facilitate market growth through our investments and unlock value for both the producer and the consumer. That's what we try to do with our investments here in Brazil. So, I've also been challenged by our host to present an original topic to make it interesting and keep it short. So at risk of failing at all of the above, I would like to show you all a couple more charts and graphs, if you don't mind. So hopefully the slide is on your screen now. In the spirit of EIG's and been investing in Brazil a little over 20 years now. So I decided to go with that theme, 20 years of natural gas prices, not in Brazil, but in the US. I call this an associated gas analogy for Brazil. We've invested in over 16,000 shale wells in our portfolio. Of course, those wells aren't nearly as large as some of these pre-salt wells. So there are many, but what I've tried to show here is the relationship of gas prices and production over time, and not overall demand. Overall demand is complicated, particularly the unique power side of the equation.
for both countries. So I've tried to really narrow it down to the industrial demand here. So on the top part of this chart, we have the prices. So I'll try to start there and work our way around this colorful chart. So on the upper left-hand quadrant, this is the dark blue line, the natural gas price. I've used annual averages here to keep it somewhat civilized. I think in the middle of the decade, prices in the US spiked at over $15 per MMBTU. But here we show these annual averages really ramping up quite dramatically in the early part of the decade of the 2000s. At this point in the US, oil and gas history, the shale gas had already begun. I think it's oftentimes a bit generalized saying that the shale gas really flooded the markets with gas. It's partly true, but at this time, the shale gas companies, the Barnett Shale, the Haynesville, the early gas shales, were really drilling, for profit. The gas prices were so high in the US, these were extraordinarily profitable ventures at that time. The US was short gas. We were planning on LNG imports at the time. EIG actually invested in an import, a regasification terminal that later was converted in the next decade to a liquefaction terminal. So that's how quickly, over the course of 2 decades, the markets can really completely do a 180. So here, what we've seen is as you get to the latter part of the decade, the prices plummeted. And back to that shale gas analogy, it was actually the associated gas from the shale oil or the tight oil that really kept prices low, that sustainable low price, less than or around $3 per MMBTU for most of the decade, less than $2 per MMBTU today. And that's because these producers weren't drilling for gas, they were drilling for oil. The gas came oftentimes as a byproduct and kept the pipelines full and kept the country supplied with gas. That's the analogy. I think that's what's happening to some extent at the early stages in Brazil today. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes in the ultra deep water, we primarily are drilling for oil and liquids. And the gas is associated gas. So the gas is really coming, with that oil production. In Brazil today, we'll come back to this price, of course. I think most are aware gas prices are significantly higher than the US. This is an average São Paulo Citygate price here in green, around $8 per MMBTU based on the data we could collect from the ministry here. So we'll come back to the gas prices. We'll shift down to the bottom, of the chart here next. So, what happened with demand? We often hear from producers here, well, where's the demand? We talked a little bit about that earlier in the presentation with Eric. And of course, the two go hand in hand, supply and demand, a little bit of a chicken and egg equation. But oftentimes we hear from producers, well, from consumers rather, at the demand side, what's the gas price? And so the implication being, at $8 gas, there's a certain amount of demand. At $7, there is implicitly incrementally more demand. At $6, even more so, and so on and so forth. And let's see, how that equation, kind of basic supply-demand fundamentals, let's see how that played out in the U.S. in the early, the first decade, that era of the early shale gas production and high gas prices. The U.S. lost 5 BCF a day of industrial demand. So how do you lose demand? These folks were taking these economic decisions to shut in plants or to switch to alternative sources of fuel. And then if you look to the right-hand side of the chart, the U.S. not only added back that 5 BCF a day that it lost in industrial demand, but added an incremental 3 BCF a day. So 8 BCF a day of demand responded to the price signal that was being sent by the producers. And 8 BCF a day, to put into context, and we're mixing units, we often talk about million cubic meters here, you need to divide by 35. So the Brazilian production of gas, the consumption rather of industrial demand in 2019 was 1.3 BCF a day. So the US added, 5 to 6 times over the course of a single decade with competitively priced gas, increased 5 to 6 times the entire Brazilian industrial demand. Another data point to put that in perspective that I've highlighted here, that today, at least the data we've been able to come through the A&P. In 2019, Brazil re-injected over 1.5 BCF a day. So we've re-injected more than the entire market of industrial demand. So what is our goal? Let's bring that gas to market. We need infrastructure investment to do it. That's the bet that we've made here. We're not arguing for artificially low gas prices, but we're also against artificially high gas prices. We view, if we let the market function, we focus on open access, which is what we do with our investments at Porto do Açu. If we continue, frankly, the reforms that are underway and can complete them, we believe that the Brazil industrial demand can respond. The power side has responded. I view the LNG to power as a bridge to this long-term industrial demand. As Daniel mentioned, we've invested in over 3 gigawatts of gas-fired, LNG to power. We hope to grow that to 6.5 gigawatts and facilitate domestic gas as well in our investments here. The point being, I think the power side has responded, but this long-term industrial demand really, we believe, can be quite competitive in places like Porto do Açu at our gas hub, where we would welcome these industries and open access gas policies in the region. So we hope that you found a little bit insightful and can come up with some questions. We appreciate this perspective from the demand and the infrastructure side. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Very interesting comparison and makes us think a lot. And of course, now that we mentioned the producers and the producers' view, it's the best time to call Claudia to join us. And Claudia is the VP Energy Marketing at Equinor. Equinor is a major, I want to say correct, international energy company, IOC no longer, and one of the major players in Brazil, especially for the long run, with a lot of volumes to come. So we talked a lot about the infrastructure and re-injection. So let's hear it from Claudia and see what she can share with us. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you. Good morning to all, and thank you for the invitation to speak. It's an honor to join such a high caliber team to share Equinor's views about what, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating subjects in Brazil, the natural gas market. But before I speak about natural gas, we cannot escape a tough reality that this unprecedented pandemic has imposed upon us. We have seen in Eric's presentation the meager outlook on gas and power demand, which combined with lower oil price outlooks means that the bar is higher, that's for sure. Budgets have been cut, investments are being reprioritized, and robust infrastructure investments are facing a lot more scrutiny from our investment committees. The greater the uncertainty, the more challenging the final investment decisions under the current scenario. The recent approval in the Brazilian lower house of the gas bill has undoubtedly been a major milestone in potentially reducing uncertainties and introducing greater legal stability for the business opportunities we at Equinor are currently developing in Brazil, with an eye on even beyond our current asset base. But this is just the beginning, since the law still needs to be voted in the Senate. This approval would not have been possible if it weren't for the amazing alignment among so many industry players with respect to the importance and need for liberalizing the gas market in Brazil. But a fully functioning liberalized gas market requires more than just a law. It requires clear steps by the incumbent to enable market access and decrease market power. Well, from what my friend Anelise has presented to all of you today, this 2019 commitment between Petrobras and the Brazilian antitrust authority, CADE, with concrete actions and timelines for the unbundling of gas distribution and transmission, along with guidelines for the transmission capacity release and many other commitments, are a critical point of no return for a liberalized gas market in Brazil. Now we need to empower ANP so that their ambitious regulatory agenda continues to develop in the same sense of urgency that the market is demanding. Buyers and sellers are actively pursuing transactions already in 2021, but there's still a high level of uncertainty as to how these can be in fact implemented. Gas transmission access is an important one, and although there are clear indications of a coordinated open season between TBG and NTS already expected in early 2021, the rules of engagement are still unclear. And if it weren't already challenging enough for producers to unravel all the peculiarities of post-gas processing, having to find markets not only for their gas, but also for their natural gas liquids, it is also very challenging for an industrial customer who in some states require a 6-month advance notice to declare themselves free. But what I can tell you is that, boy, the appetite from both the supply and the demand side for moving forward is huge. It really reminds me of the first few power trades that I negotiated in Brazil some 20 years ago, and look at the power market, where it is today and how much it has developed over the same period. So lots of potential on the gas market as well. However, a competitive gas market will not develop based on current gas production. Conditions that enable the development of new upstream projects, enabling the investment in new midstream infrastructure will be key. And the name of the game here is predictability. Investors need to have a predictable framework in order to de-risk their investments. Our projects compete for funding with other projects in our global portfolio. And when the uncertainties are too high, their minimum return thresholds must be risk adjusted. Therefore, having a predictable regulatory environment with a gas bill approved in the Senate without changes to the draft will come a long way. Another important enabler for new upstream projects will be gas demand. I think much of that has been talked, I think, and Kevin has given a very interesting overview of the US example. These projects unquestionably require long-term demand anchors under the current market design to bring predictability to investment decisions. And I could not lie to you that I would not love to have dozens of inflexible power plants demanding gas in Brazil. However, we do not believe that putting this in the gas bill is the right approach. You do not develop a liberalized market by creating cross subsidies. The focus, in my opinion, should be in adequately valuing the flexibility attributes that our hydrothermal power system demands, as well as assessing the reliability required by the increased supply of intermittent solar and wind sources. So we have important challenges ahead, but the will to overcome them is immense. This pandemic has forced us to break many paradigms, and we are reinventing ourselves. In adversity, we're not only finding new ways, but we're doing so in a more collaborative way. If ANP sticks to its regulatory agenda, Petrobras fulfills their CADE commitments, the government continues searching for ways to foster new gas demand, and finally, the Brazilian Senate approves the draft gas bill as it is, I have no doubt that we can make this new gas market a reality.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Very exciting to hear all of that. And I like when you said the point of no return. I've been asked that question a few times by foreign investors already, and I kind of use the same reference. So very good to know that you think the same. And of course, predictability. I guess all of us working in these reforms, we definitely want this to be a rule of thumb for whatever we are doing here. Now, I think it's time to call Victor and go back to an investor's perspective. Victor is the head of LatAm for Denham Capital, a global PE fund, very active in Brazil and in the region, and focus on power generation, mining, and oil and gas. So Victor brings a lot of experience from making decision investments in Brazil and witnessing the changes in the oil and gas market we have here. Victor, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Daniel. First of all, I want to thank the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce and Machado Meyer for organizing this event. I think it's very important that we all contribute in showing what's really happening in the country, where the opportunities and the risk lake and these kind of events are certainly a great forum to do that. So thank you again. Quick word about Denham. We've been in the market for 15 years. As Daniel mentioned, we invest in oil and gas, mining, and power generation. Particularly in Brazil, we started investing in 2007. So we've been active for the last 13 years here. We've gone through several crises, and we see our businesses in long term. Rather than being the classic private equity fund that buys an operating company and puts some more debt on it or lays off half of the people and then sell it for more money, we are company builders. We start by identifying opportunities in the market, identifying the right people to execute, putting it all together along with our capital. And many, many times we start with a business plan. We are the type of investor who's willing to take the higher risk. In the case of power generation, we take the risk of development, the risk of construction. And in the case of oil and gas and mining, we take risk of exploration and production. So we do that because, as I said, we're company builders, and we have a series of skills of operational knowledge that most of financial people do not necessarily have. And of course, yeah, we do have all the financial tools to evaluate our investments, etc. So just as an example, in the power sector here in Brazil, we started with a business plan 8 years ago, and today we built a company with more than 800 megawatts of wind power and operation under construction. Perhaps one of the largest independent renewable energy companies in the country. I think my colleagues have presented a great and comprehensive view of the sector. We've seen the analysis of what's going on, the pros, the cons, the data. So what I like to do is take a step back, and I am an investor, so I want to give a little bit of a view of what investor sees here. And let me start by saying, I think it's highly commendable what's happening in Brazil with these changes in regulations. I came here to Brazil in 2007. At the time, the oil and gas industry was starting to flourish. We have easily 30 independent oil and gas companies in the country. We had several years with these oil and gas auctions for land, for concessions. But then everything stopped at the end of 2008, 2009, and all that industry that was forming pretty much died. We are seeing the resurgence of the industry over the last few years. And that's why I say it is highly commendable that I think the country is going again to or after the best use of its resources in pro of hopefully all the people here. It felt before all these changes that were mentioned before that we were stuck in a circle, as somebody mentioned, chicken and egg, right? We really didn't have a very competitive offer of natural gas. Therefore, there was no demand, And since there was no demand, there was no need for infrastructure projects, and without infrastructure projects, you had no investment, and without the investment, you didn't have an offer, and so on and so forth. And we were stuck there. These changes are, in my opinion, a very good attempt to break that situation and unlock all the benefits that the oil and gas sector has in Brazil, with all the potential that it brings for everybody. So that's number one. The second thing that I'd like to say as an investor is, as much as I'm happy to see what's going on, we still have to see a lot of stuff to happen to really bring a lot of investments, right? We need to see the finalization of all the laws and regulations, particularly as well at the state level. Many of the projects will cross more than one state, so we need to see how that's really going to encompass in the development of projects. Once all that's done, there will be, as in any industry that is beginning or starting or accelerating its development, a series of initial opportunities that will be riskier than others, but at the same time will have potential way higher returns. And then as time goes by, if it follows what we usually see in other industries, there will be more players. The risk will probably be coming down, but at the same time, you will already have players that are well entrenched or that have very good assets, etc., and probably the returns will start to go down. So as an investor, you need to pick and choose when and where do you want to enter. You want to be kind of a pioneer, take high risk, hit for the fences, or do you want to wait a little bit more and see how things are play out, be more of a second or even a third way? And again, that's for every investor to decide. There's all types of investors, but that's certainly something that's coming upon us, and it's going to be interesting to watch. The message here is, I don't see all the opportunities just yet in front of us. I think we'll have to be patient and see how they are coming up. And as investors, we'll have to see where and how to allocate our resources. So that's number two. Number three, in any case, Brazil has a tremendous potential from both the resource side. Brazil is a resource-rich country. And of course, we all know it's one of the largest economies, one of the largest populations, tremendous demand. So it is clear that the fundamentals are there for a large, a very interesting development of the sector. And the final point that I want to mention as an investor is the importance of the stability of the regulation, or the stability of the rules of the game. Sometimes, and I could be criticized for saying this, but sometimes it's not even the rules that we have. It's more the stability of those rules over time that allows us to plan, especially in these kind of sectors where investments are going to be long-term investments in infrastructure, in operations, etc. This is not going in and out, buying and selling stock. This is looking at projects with a lot of operational complexity. Where's the demand going to be, et cetera, and you invested and hopefully invested for the long run. In those cases, it's extremely important to have stability of the game for the development of the sector, and therefore for the presenting of the new opportunities of investment. And I want very briefly compare what I've seen in the region over the last 13 years that I've been very active in the sector. And I always compare how the Colombian oil and gas sector followed what Brazil was doing, and how both sectors and in the oil and gas E&P sector developed. It's particularly onshore, to be even more specific. Brazil, several years ago, took the step to end the monopoly of Petrobras, create the National Agency of Petroleum, the ANP, and open the sector to new companies. New companies are starting to appear and grow, and things were going well. Colombia literally copied that framework. Took Ecopetrol, the Colombian Petrobras, took the monopoly away from Ecopetrol, created the national agency, slightly change of name. Colombia is chose the Agencia National Agency of Hydrocarbons and Petroleum. Here is called the National Agency of Petroleum. And same story, new independent companies, onshore exploration started to show up. However, the lack of stability of the rules of the game in Brazil took that onshore E&P industry to a halt in 2009. Most of those companies, small companies that were active, basically disappeared or came to be very, very small. In Colombia, on the other end, the rules of the game stayed stable. And before this new era with the National Agency of Petroleum, with Ecopetrol being non-monopoly, the Colombian government received 2% of all its revenues from the oil and gas sector. At its peak, after all these changes, 12 years after the changes, the Colombian government was receiving 25% of its revenue from the oil and gas sector, showing how the stability of the rules had allowed the private sector do its job, grow an industry, pay a huge amount of taxes for the government, create large amounts of jobs, develop universities where new engineers of petroleum were coming out of Colombia, developing a chain of supply, et cetera, et cetera. That didn't happen here in Brazil because the changes in regulation, the lack of stability in the rules of the game. And it is, in a way, a tragedy in the sense that Brazil is a country with a lot more resources, with a tremendous capability in its professionals, a tremendous demand in its people. So the last message that I want to send here is, I am sure that for this tremendous, a very commendable effort that has been done in changing this, in developing the sector, it's going to be very important to have a stability in the rules of the game that will allow investors to do part of his job, that will allow the private sector to do his job over time. Because this sector is not going to be developed in the next 6 months, not in the next 360 days, not in the next 2 years. In my opinion, it might take 5 to 10 years to develop the sector. So therefore, we need a very stable regulation. And that's the last message that I want to send. Again, this is from the point of view of an investor. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks a lot, Victor. And I know we're running out of time, but we definitely want to tackle a few of the questions from the attendees. So I'll start with the question to Anelise. Anelise, after the CADE agreement, what's Petrobras' strategy in working with investors to promote gas infrastructure that will be required for Petrobras' own upstream developments? I mean, we keep hearing sometimes the question about, is there going to be a gridlock? Is there enough capacity to offload all of the upstream pre-salt gas? If you want to enlighten them, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, we hear about a lot about this lack of infrastructure to evacuate the pre-salt volumes. And in fact, what we have today, the system count today with 2 routes that are in operation, and a third gas route that is being built and probably will be already in operation by the end of next year. It means an overall capacity of 44 million cubic meters per day of gas export to shore, the offshore gas pipelines. Is this investment enough for pre-salt? what we can say is that this infrastructure is enough for the projects that are already under development. And what I'm talking about that, I'm saying about Tupi Field and Sapinhoá and Búzios and the fields that are already in the process of production build-up. We have part of this gas is being reinjected. It's true. And I would like to explain why, because I think some people made confusion on that. In fact, it's the reinjection, the gas reinjection in pre-salt is a very important method to add recover oil. What I mean by that is that, as you know, we have oil with associated gas, and this gas comes with CO2, mainly around 20 to 40% of CO2 in most of these fields. We cannot vent this CO2 for the atmosphere, of course, and CO2 must be reinjected. And the part of the natural gas is being reinjected with CO2. This mixture, gas and CO2, it has what we say a miscibility pressure that equals the pressure of the reservoir. In the case of pre-salt, is not in everywhere. I'm not talking about shale in the US, it doesn't happen there, but the miscibility pressure here in the pre-salt reservoirs, it gives an opportunity for the producers, for the operators, to increase a lot the oil production. When we have giant fields, as we have in pre-salt, it means billions of barrels, oil barrels, that can be produced by the reinjection of gas CO2 with water. And we cannot afford to leave these wells in the subsurface. So it's not a question that there is a lack of infrastructure. It's an economical decision made by the consortium that operates these fields. That's why sometimes I refer to that, the decision of whether to have an infrastructure or not in the case of pre-salt is a very specific case. It's a question for the producers, for the EP partners that take the risks and operate in this area. It's quite different from US. When you have shale onshore, the infrastructure is already built and depreciated, and you have pipelines in all over the country, we can say like that. When we talk about offshore, of course, the cost to build this infrastructure is much higher. We don't build offshore pipelines without having we are very certain that there is much gas to be exported. Of course, we are not building pipelines without this certainty. And in the case of the pre-salt, as I said, they had a special condition where gas reinjection adds value to the project. So I hear that Eric said the reinjection has no economic value. Probably in many parts of the world, not in pre-salt. has a very important economic value. By saying that, of course, there are many other blocks that should be developed in the next pre-salt phase. But many of these blocks are still in the exploratory phase. So there is some risks, and we must wait for the operators to de-risk the projects and take the decision to develop these fields. And as I said, gas has an important part of this equation, of the decision. And we are working with partners, pre-salt partners. As you know, most of the pre-salt partners are major oil companies, well known in the oil and gas industry. And we are discussing about having a consortium for this infrastructure for offshore gas pipelines. And probably in this case, there will be also opportunity for financial investors for to gather with us in order to form a company that could build these infrastructures, but always take into account the upstream decision. I mean, the producers and operators that would have to decide whether what brings more value, to reinject the gas and increase the volume of oil to be produced, or export the gas. Of course, it's not, we cannot reinject all the gas. It's impossible. Of course, a great part of this gas must be exported, but it's not 100%. And people must understand that.
Yeah, I'll just clarify. What we were talking about was of productive gas capacity, or which to us is after you've made the reinjection decision. You always have to make the reinjection decision first, of course, to optimize your oil production. That's going to provide, that's your number one decision. And absolutely just wanted to clarify that, understand completely that reinjection actually has a ton of value for maximizing oil production, Anelise. But sorry that it wasn't clear in my slide.
So Eric, there's two questions from Armando Enrique for you. I guess they're a two-part question. He asked, how will the solid red line in your demand chart change with the realization of gas massification? And what do you see the impact of large-scale storage infrastructure on that enabling gas massification?
Sure. So first, just to remind everyone what Anelise said in the beginning, we had a market in 2019 of 82 million cubic meters a day in Brazil. Our view is that we get over 100 million cubic meters a day in 2030 and 130 million cubic meters a day by 2040. That is in a normal water, hydro water conditions. And if you think about the potential, again, we did it at the municipality level, we came up to a potential of about 180 to 200 million cubic meters a day of market in Brazil. To Kevin's point, industrialization, really the sky's the limit, right? So you do need to, it could be even larger. But from a realistic perspective and looking at the industrial needs in Brazil and the export potential industrial product export markets globally, we put that around 200 million cubic meters a day. That would grow about twice as fast as what we have in our outlook. So there's clearly a lot of demand side market potential. And from an infrastructure perspective, you know, there's obviously, in order to facilitate that, we need to see significant investment in transport, gathering, processing. We need to see significant investment in distribution, and as well as gas storage would play a role in Brazil. You know, the gas storage value is not the same as extreme climates with really strong seasonality, but Brazil does have a seasonal market, so storage does have a role to play moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. And I don't know, Kevin, if you want to tackle on that, there's a question to you as well from the public. Maybe you can merge the two.
Yeah, I may start where Eric left off. It's kind of like a presidential debate, I guess. If your name gets invoked, you can rebut a bit. I actually am in agreement, with Eric on the industrialization. I just wanted to put a finer point on, illustrating something. Yes, you would need a fair amount of additional infrastructure. Just to plug our own investments again, real quickly. We do believe places along the coast like Portugal Sul that are open access that have export zones and some tax incentive areas that you can land a domestic gas pipeline directly, at the port. The storage is tricky in Brazil. In the U.S., the high volume, high turn capacity storage is mostly driven by salt domes. We don't have that abundance of geology in the regions here that I'm aware of. I think that's industry consensus. I think there is potential for some reservoir storage, which is a little bit lower turn, but there is potential there. The other way to balance the equation is the LNG and power system. That the power can act as a cushion to be able to absorb some demand and some intermittency. And the LNG can be a peak shaving mechanism because what you're looking for ultimately in this constant flow of gas, hydrocarbon molecule, you're looking for consistency. You want to smooth out the curves to match the supply and the demand because it is so challenging to store. So, we're working on projects like that, and that's really the, essence of our LNG to power paired with an industrial hub in a single location. That's actually what we're going for there. In terms of the question, it looks like we're talking about the reinjection again, so I'm reading the question here. And so I believe that the answer to the question is, and I can read it here for those that aren't looking, is the current regulatory evolution expected to tackle this issue of the demand response and the historical market circumstances? And it's alluding to, is the reinjection the root cause of it? I agree that it is not the root cause of it. The reinjection comment in my slide was related just as a comparison, just to show the scale of the market here in Brazil. And so, the 1.3 to 1.5 BCF a day is the entire industrial demand. I just wanted to show by way of comparison, that is how much is being reinjected, as Eric has pointed out, that we can probably grow that 4 or 5-fold in terms of the market of available gas, in the country. So I believe that this, as I just described, this combining the industry, I have to go back to the one, key point. It's all about price. And so when you talk to someone on the demand side of the equation, again, the question is, what's the price of the gas? And I can try to illustrate without a slide, just a simple example when we talk about industry in Brazil. There is, you take a producer in the steelmaking value chain. There's a lot of iron ore produced in Brazil. That iron ore sometimes is iron ore concentrate. It's upgraded to a pellet. That process consumes gas. That pellet is oftentimes then upgraded, or at least in the new market of gas around the world, is upgraded to steel using DRI technology, direct reduced iron. That process, someone that's looking to maybe establish that type of technology in Brazil, like they are in the US, they may be looking at making a several $100 million investment, maybe larger. And to consume 1 million cubic meters a day of gas at Brazilian gas prices, you're talking about $100 million of annual average cost, on top of the upfront investment. At US gas prices, that's a quarter of that, right? It's a fraction of that. And so what you see happen is Brazilian iron ore leave the country in a raw format, go to the US and be upgraded using lower cost gas there. That same process can actually happen more efficiently at a place in Brazil where the iron ore and the gas can meet in a single location. It optimizes the logistics because it minimizes the loading and unloading. And you see that happen really quite frequently. We see this type of product, go to the Middle East or go to Asia to be upgraded. Sometimes the final product ends up coming back to Brazil in the form of an import. And so I think the goal of these types of hubs that we talk about at Porto do Sul is really to pair the supply and the demand, to pair the different forms of supply and demand, LNG, domestic gas, industrial demand, power, so you can create that balancing and optimization. And the more you do it in the hub, the more efficient it can be, the more efficiently it can be done, the more competitive the product, and the more the industry can grow.
Thanks, Kevin. Very interesting. And well, the debate is getting to a good place. Maybe it's time to call Claudia. Claudia, you know, Equinor is an integrated energy company. You've heard a little bit in the Q&A round about reinjection. I'm sure you have your own view about that. About storage, which could be a key factor in offloading the gas. But also, if I could ask you to talk a little bit about the integration between the gas and power markets in Brazil. I mean, we know Equinor is looking to the future to become a huge player on power as well. So if you could try to combine all of those in your comments, that I would appreciate.
Well, I'll give it a try. It's a big mission there, but storage. Let's start with storage. I think Armando has asked this question on large-scale gas storage, and it is definitely one of the important aspects within Brazil is that we don't have significant storage currently. And so lots of interesting counterparties looking at opportunities to develop reservoir storage and all that. And that is certainly something that is going to be extremely welcome in Brazil, and very much tied to your last question, which is the power sector. The power sector in Brazil today requires a level of flexibility from the gas side that is quite high and not necessarily adequate for an associated gas field, which needs to make sure that you can flow gas in order to ensure your oil production or your condensate upstream production. So having whatever mechanisms that you can have that can ensure flow assurance are always going to be valuable and interesting for the upstream players. Also, especially considering, and here now getting more on the legal side, the limited enforceabilities that we are observing with respect to balancing agreements in the upstream. And I think that is something that we still have to come up and crack that code and figure out how to address those things. And so I think that is at least my 2 cents on this. The integration of gas and power is an important development. I think we have a lot of challenges there to overcome. From a new project developer, I guess from the upstream perspective, we have the chicken and the egg problem when you have the auction rules very well established to address the risks of the power plant developer. But those rules of engagement, they don't necessarily match the risks of the upstream producer that is not necessarily potentially at the same timeline or the same schedule of decisions, and might not have achieved a financial investment decision of developing a field in order to commit to a long-term GSA that probably entails very severe early termination damages if you walk away from the deal. So lots of challenges to overcome there. And also this whole discussion of what exactly is the role that natural gas is going to take in the overall Brazilian energy matrix, and the need that the power sector has for substantial flexibility. And I think that is, the key crux of the matter. But I believe that right now the government and agents are all trying to get together and come up with ideas and solutions that are market driven and not necessarily another jabuticaba, as we call in Brazil, or another Frankenstein that is just something that's going to create more cross subsidy. So I'm hopeful there. I think Anelise tackled the reinjection issue quite well. I think a lot of people very frequently do not take into account that reinjection is very often an economic decision that in the end is maximizing reservoir recovery, it's maximizing wealth, it's maximizing royalties for the country, and people, I think, sometimes mislead or misinterpret the reinjection numbers. And then finally, in addressing Amanda's question on storage and the decision to reinject in Bacalhau and Carcará, certainly, I think right now it's something that is useful overall for the industry. The Carcará or Bacalhau currently is in a process that phase 1 will involve reinjection. We're still analyzing what we're going to do on phase 2. There's still a lot of appraisal work to be done. So I don't think that a massive, large scale storage opportunity would be necessarily the main drivers for a decision or not to reinject in Bacalhau.
Thank you, Claudia. Sorry for the challenge, but you obviously did so well, and thank you for clarifying all of those. I know we are very tight on the time, but I wanted to ask Victor again on the investor perspective. We haven't yet tackled the currency issue and currency risk here in Brazil, and we know the gas chain is diverse. There are parts of it which are anchored partly or even totally in US dollars, and to the other end, partly or totally in Brazilian reais. So having dealt with the Brazilian real currency risk for so long, what can you share with investors in terms of how that play goes into making long-term investments in Brazil?
I can share that it's very complicated. The Brazilian real is one of the most volatile currencies. We as USD denominated investors, we keep scoring US dollar. It is what it is. And I think for large investments, although more and more there is local pockets of investment, for large investments in Brazil, there will be the need of foreign investors coming in. And therefore, this question of foreign exchange risks become extremely important. As I said, we've been here for the last 13 years, and we have been investing in the power sector for the last 8. The power sector shares with the natural gas sector the fact that most of the revenue sources are denominated in Brazilian real. And financially, up to now, there's really not a competitive hedge that you can put on top of your project long-term to cover the risk of the variations of the Brazilian real exchange rate. Therefore, you have to look for other ways to protect yourself. In our case, I'd like to highlight perhaps 2. In the power sector, and this is very particular to the power sector, I'm not trying to extend it to the gas sector, but what we've done in the power sector is we analyzed how the PPAs from auctions behave versus the changes in foreign exchange. For many years, as we know, Brazil had high or higher levels of inflation. And after a lot of statistical analysis, we found that inflation was, and I underlined it was, a dirty hedge to devaluation. Theory being that in front of a big devaluation that is sustained over time, as Brazil is a major importer of many things, those higher cost of imports as a result of the devaluation would make its way through the system, increasing eventually inflation. And that inflation increases the prices of power because the PPAs, the contracts from the auctions, are indexed to local inflation. It's not a perfect hedge, was not a perfect hedge, but it was a dirty hedge that provided certain level of protection. And what we saw is that it worked over several of the crises that we had. However, today, I put a big question mark to that analysis we did in the past because Brazilian economy has changed. We don't live anymore in the Brazilian economy with really high levels of inflation, neither of interest rates. So in that case, the increases in prices for devaluation cannot be easily passed to the consumer, and therefore the impact on inflation is not as clear as it was before. So that was number one, if people were able to get comfortable with that dairy hedge. And the other is more of an operational thing. Can you find a customer who's willing to pay you in US dollars or associated to a US dollar index? In the case of the gas sector, I think there's very limited opportunities of that. First of all, because you need a large consumer. And second, because it would have to be somebody that is like an exporter who gets revenues in dollars and therefore is willing to pay expenses in dollar, hedging its own position. And when you look at who could be that kind of entity, well, you probably come up with Vale, large exporter, and does need a lot of energy coming from natural gas. But once you cross out that name, not a lot of other names come to mind. And although it's something that could work theoretically, matching, again, customer who has revenue in dollars, therefore can take cost in dollars at the other end, I don't see a lot of those customers with enough size to anchor a project and help us develop some of the infrastructure that we need. So it is a complicated situation. It affects not only the equity, it also affects the financing. That's why, at least in the power sector, we've always relied, or we used to rely on BNDES and on BNB to finance the projects, only until recently, the last 3-4 years, where the market for infrastructure debentures has become deeper. But for these kind of really, really large projects, financing, debt financing in dollars is also a question mark. So it's a tough question, tough nut to crack, Danny.
John, I know we are limited on time, right?
Yeah, I think we've gone over time. Thank you all for attending. If there's 3 questions that weren't answered, we'll send those to each of the panelists and have them answered by email. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, all the panelists. That was really great. And thank you all for joining. I wanted to again thank the sponsor of the event, Machado Meyer Advogados. Before we close, I wanted to remind you that our next webinar will take place this Thursday, the 17th September at 3 p.m. when we will host a panel discussion on reinventing business strategy for the evolving environment. Until then, stay healthy and in good spirits. Thank you again.